So thank you to everybody that's joined. We'll start now. So welcome again to our fifth business continuity planning webinar update. I'm joined today by Stephanie Pote, HR advisor, and by Greg Taylor, partner in financial services. And we're going to cover an update really focusing on the here and now and maybe how we move forward, looking at where we are in terms of elements of support around employees to start with, coronavirus job retention scheme, also the move back to planning the environment for staff and customers to come back to us on, some of the staff issues and concerns we need to deal with, and what the financial support looks like, so an update on the CBILS and the other funding from Greg. So I'll just start off. Since our last webinar, the coronavirus job retention scheme has been extended. We were tipped off that it would be, but it was beyond our expectations. It's now been extended to the end of October. So it will carry on in its current form until the end of July. So that's in relation to people being fully furloughed and the 80% or capped at £2,500 a month. So that will carry on as it is. But from the beginning of August until the end of October, there'll be more flexibility in the scheme, so that the scheme will then be designed to facilitate the easing back of people into the workplace via part-time working. However, during that period from August to October, employers will be expected to pay a percentage of salaries to those staff that remain furloughed. We'll have to think about what furlough looks like, because we may have some people not doing any work at all and some doing part-time. But the guarantee for employees who benefit from the scheme is they will still receive that 80% capped at £2,500 per month. So some good news in relation to knowing that where we are until the end of July, that there is an extension and more flexibility from August to the end of October. But employers who facilitate the furlough grant scheme will need to start contributing. And we'll need to factor that into any sort of cash flow forecasts, etc., certainly for that period from August to the end of October. More details will be available by the end of May, and as soon as we have those, we'll provide some further guidance. But it's probably more likely to be quite near the end of May rather than tomorrow. HMRC in the meantime have clarified some things in relation to the furlough grant scheme. That is, only submit one claim per pay period. The system will reject any claims where there are overlapping periods. So you include all the employees that you can during that period, because if claims have overlapping pay periods, there'll be some rejection. Where that has resulted perhaps in the past of some people not being included, don't amend your next claim. If you find an error for whatever reason, or you avoided putting some people on because of an overlapping claim period potential, don't amend the next claim. Make sure that next claim is correct. But HMRC are definitely working on an amended claim process. So that's how you can pick up some of the things or that you've subsequently found might not have been correct, or some of the employees that you should have included that you haven't. Then they will go through the amended claim process. Don't take it upon yourself to alter the next claim to deal with that. They've now updated the need to keep records. So this is consultation details, furlough letters, details of how you calculated your claim, etc., for 6 years. It was 5, it's now 6. So I think we can kind of see how that's panning out in relation to the need to review these by HMRC. And they're also putting some guidance out there, which is kind of quite interesting, and gives an idea of perhaps some of the things that might have been reported to them in relation to errors or fraud. You cannot furlough your employee and to volunteer for you in the same or a different role. I think we all knew that that's what should be happening anyway, but obviously maybe some employers have said, oh, you can volunteer, so you can come back and volunteer for us. No, you can't. If you're furloughed, you can't work for your employer. That's pretty clear. Obviously the the portal is going to be pretty active now for May claims. So you need to get those claims in ASAP. Obviously, the guarantee was if the claim was in by the end of yesterday, that would definitely be paid before the end of May. So get those claims sorted for the funds to come through, ready to make the payment for the May payroll. Obviously, that's just about cash flow. The portal's open and it's open for you to use. There have been some scams. HMRC have made it clear that you shouldn't give out private information or reply to text messages. So if they text you, they don't expect replies to text messages. Don't download attachments. They tend to use links rather than attachments. So if you weren't expecting there to be an attachment, please don't open it because they don't tend to send things out that way. They tend to sort of link you to their website. And if you do have any suspicious emails, you can forward them. That's with a PH, not an F. phishing@hmrc.co.uk, or there is a text number of 60599 to forward on any texts. They're also opening up on the 26th of May the statutory sick pay claim. So this is for people that, again, were on the payroll at the end of February, for employers that have less than 250 employees, and where employees are off sick, and that sickness started after the 13th of March, or if they were shielding after the 16th of April because of coronavirus, and they've got an isolation note, perhaps from NHS 111, or an NHS or GP letter telling them to stay at home for the 12 weeks, then obviously that claim for those 2 weeks of sick pay is being opened up eventually. You can claim for the same employee who may have been off sick for a period and then been furloughed for a period. So you can claim for them under the sick pay scheme and the coronavirus job retention scheme, but not for the same period. So obviously they would have they can't be sick and have furlough pay for the same period, but they could have a sickness and then move on to furlough. And the PAYE deferral opportunities are still open. So there's a coronavirus helpline to call, but be mindful that HMRC are being very generous with PAYE deferral at the moment, but they won't be looking for you to defer the national insurance that you've had from a furlough claim. They'd be looking for you to pay that to them. So obviously any other national insurance and tax can be part of that deferral request, but not national insurance that has been repaid to you as part of a furlough grant. You're expected to pay that over without delay. So just some updates there in relation to those elements, and I'll pass you over to Stephanie to look at the staff environment and staff concerns.
Thank you very much, Nigel. So regarding return to work, first thing to note is there was never a government order for work to stop, apart from those businesses that were required by law to close, non-essential shops in the hospitality sector, only that non-essential travel should stop, and we should minimise the number of people that we come into contact with. Therefore, those that could work from home were told that they should do so. And that requirement is still in place. If you can work from home, then you should do wherever possible. Only if it is not possible should employers now be requiring employees to return. The government suggested that this would be construction, manufacturing, research, logistics, other driving roles, food production, but not food service. So working from home should still be your first option. If that can't be done due to the nature of the business or the role, then employers must institute measures to protect their employees as far as reasonably practicable. Employers have a duty of care towards their employees under the Health and Safety at Work Act and must provide a safe place and a safe system of work. So before having employees back to the premises, employers must carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment, identify any risks and put any suitable measures in place. And what they will be will vary from industry to industry, from workplace to workplace, but there are some general guidelines. Social distancing. If you can have people work alone, that's obviously your maximum social distancing, but other than that, your 2 meters applies. So you'll need to be looking at moving furniture, redesigning workstations to accommodate it, using tape on the floor if necessary to mark out those 2 meters distancing. If that can't be done due to the nature of the work, then consider having perspex screens in place between your employees. If you do have two people who need to work fewer than 2 metres, try and minimise their face-to-face contact and try and make them be more side to side, which obviously reduces the risk. You should have machinery in place anyway to assist with manual handling, but if you do have a scenario where people are required to lift an object, then again, try to do that so that they're not face to face. Keep people in teams or in pairings so they're minimising the numbers of people they come into contact with. And use face coverings if you can't take any other measures. The other thing should really be your priority. Face masks should be reserved for clinical settings. Face coverings, and we've all seen the things on the internet about making them out of old t-shirts, can be used, but only as an alternative to the other measures. They should be your last solution. Hygiene and hand washing are obviously crucial. Employees should wash their hands with soap or hand sanitizer on arrival at regular periods throughout the day, particularly before eating food, and of course after going to the toilet, and I would hope they would be doing that anyway, and before leaving the premises. Make sure your workplace is cleaned regularly, especially any communal areas or things that are touched by many people. Try to eliminate the sharing of tools and equipment as much as possible. If that's not possible, then again, ensure thorough and regular cleaning. Between cleaning equipment and cleaning of hands, the risk of infection should be kept to a minimum. Implement staggered start and finish times to avoid congregating at doors and also to reduce the number of employees you have at work at any one time. So use shift systems, alternate days or weeks of working. If you are having staff in alternately, then keep them to the same workstations if possible. There's only ever 2 people using the same one. Restrict the use of communal areas such as kitchens. It might be reasonable to require employees to bring in their own drinks if you can't otherwise regulate the use of those areas. If you usually provide food via a canteen, then provide packaged meals instead. If you have a separate staff area for consuming food, make sure it's marked out such that your 2 metres distance is maintained. Employees should clean up after themselves. Again, hopefully they do that anyway, and the area itself should be regularly cleaned. Exactly what you do and how will be determined by your specific risk assessment. There is government guidance available for specific industries, and obviously your own health and safety reps can assist. Where employees are unable to return, you'll need to keep in touch with them. They'll be carrying on working from home, or if you haven't got work for them to do, they'll remain on furlough. Keep in touch with them, let them know what you're doing in the workplace so they remain informed and also feel that they're connected, and it gives them a heads up for when they are able to return. Regarding staff concerns about returning to work, as I said, employees should be permitted to continue to work from home if at all possible. Most people are doing this as an emergency measure, either since the 23rd of March or a little bit before. It wasn't planned, people might not have proper equipment or a suitable working area. We've all done Zoom or team meetings. Notice what people have had in their backgrounds. They're not generally normal office setup, so just bear that in mind. Carry on having conversations with your employers about anything that they might need in order to work comfortably. For those who can't work from home, then it is now a reasonable management instruction to require them to return to work in the workplace, provided that you have taken reasonable steps to ensure a COVID-19 secure workplace, as we've just discussed. So conduct your risk assessment, comply with the guidance, engage with your health and safety reps. When you're requiring employees to return, set out the measures you are taking to ensure their safety and what they in turn are required to comply with. And there is a government poster which you may have seen which can be downloaded and displayed, setting out that you are compliant. If any employees do have concerns about returning, then address these on a case-by-case basis. So what about if they just flatly refuse? Well, an employee has to believe that they are in serious and imminent danger in order to justify either leaving the workplace or not returning to it in the first place. If you have observed the COVID-19 secure guidelines, then generally an employee can't reasonably believe themselves to actually be in danger. Certainly no more danger than in the world at large. If an employee refuses return to work, if you can demonstrate that you have taken all measures and addressed any individual concerns, and you have reasonable belief that the employee is basically trying it on in order to stay at home on furlough pay, you can consider this to be misconduct and you can take disciplinary action, but only take action if you are absolutely sure of your position. Obviously, there are some individual areas of consideration. Childcare. Being a parent is not a protected category. We do have time off for dependents, which is unpaid leave, but this is clearly an unprecedented situation with the schools being closed. So is it fair to penalise parents, even if it isn't unlawful? Job retention scheme allows for employees to be furloughed due to childcare responsibilities, so you might consider that to be appropriate. The schools are hopefully reopening in a couple of weeks anyway. Pregnancy, obviously if a pregnant woman does not feel safe returning, you'd probably be best to allow that. And note that pregnancy is not the same as sickness. If you conduct your risk assessment and you cannot adequately protect her, she'd be placed on paid medical suspension, not sick leave, until a time where she can safely return. Obviously anyone who's shielding cannot return. And if an employee has an underlying medical condition but isn't actually in receipt of a shielding letter, consider what reasonable adjustments you can make to facilitate their safe return. That might be even greater social distancing, working alone if you can. If they are capable of working, then they should be returning. But if you can't take appropriate measures, it would be safer to leave them on furlough. Subjecting them to a detriment due to their medical condition might constitute disability discrimination. In any other case, you can continue to use furlough if you have no other option, but explore all avenues and make a decision on a case-by-case basis so as not to set a precedent. Otherwise, you could end up with everybody refusing to return. In terms of what you expect from your employees, as we said, you should set out clearly prior to their return what the new requirements will be in the workplace in terms of social distancing and hygiene. Make sure they understand the rules and ensure that they are enforced. People should be used to these sorts of measures generally by now, but it's very easy to get back into the workplace and forget that the rules still apply and slip back into your old familiar habits when you're back into that environment. Some employers have considered using return to work questionnaires, so employees declare that they don't have symptoms and nor does anybody else in their household. I would say consider the usefulness of this, as obviously a lot of people have had COVID-19 asymptomatically, and in some respects it's almost best to treat everybody as though they have it. Similarly, the temperature checks. You can require your employees to undertake non-invasive temperature checks, and those who refuse would not be allowed to enter the premises and would be put on unpaid leave if your risk assessment shows that that is a suitable control measure. Again, people can be asymptomatic, so consider if that is useful in itself. And obviously, employees must be instructed not to come into the workplace if they have symptoms, and if they do, that must be considered a serious breach of health and safety and disciplinary action taken. If you have an actual case at work or an employee who starts presenting the symptoms in the workplace, clearly that person must be sent home immediately or medical attention sought for them if the symptoms are severe. Then the area must be thoroughly cleaned, with the cleaning materials and gloves being placed in double bags, disposed of no earlier than 72 hours later. Obviously, employees should be informed. You need to be transparent with them. Don't allow the rumour mill to start, but they should be reassured that it's been dealt with and doesn't present a danger to them going forward. What you should do is contact Public Health England to discuss the individual case. Anyone who may have come into contact with them, take advice on any other action that you might need to take. Okay, thank you very much. I shall hand you over to Greg.
Hi everybody, we will look at the various funding options available and have a quick run through the government schemes. So obviously the three government schemes we'll look at will be the Bounce Back Loan Scheme, BBLS, the CBIL scheme, the Coronavirus Business Loan Interruption Scheme, and the Coronavirus Large Business Loan Interruption Scheme. And to start with, what we'll do is we'll look at some numbers on those, and then we'll move forward with some anecdotal evidence, look at some other funding options, and compare and contrast those loans and what might be better for you to use. So up to date in terms of loan values and what's been put out the door. So on Bounce Back Loan Scheme so far, cumulative numbers of facilities approved, 268,173, but that's from a total number of applications of 363,646 and a total of £8.378 billion out the door. You've then got CBILS, which has a total of only 35,919 applications approved out of a total of 71,316, with £6.094 billion out the door. On the larger scheme, the Coronavirus Large Business Interruption Loan Scheme, only 59 facilities approved out of the total number of applications of 358. And then that's a total of £359 million. So as you can see, the approval rates are less than 50% on some and around 50% on the original CBIL scheme. Isn't good enough, if I'm honest. It should be higher than that, the approval rate. Some of the common things that we are seeing around the schemes that are causing issues are the use of the 29 numbers as part of the scheme rules as the starting point. Clearly, lots of difficulties around those 2019 numbers. Brexit, for example, had a knock-on effect on people's 2019 numbers. You can also have some issues around exceptional items in the accounts, which if you're putting the application in yourself and you're not making the bank aware of those exceptional items, they're just going to use the numbers, the backdated information they've got in front of them. So again, I think I've said it before, but again, using a professional intermediary, you're 33% more likely to get your application accepted than you are putting it in yourself. So if you have been rejected, there are now 63 different suppliers of the CBILS loan. So that's the smaller one between sort of up to £5 million out the door, 10 and 5 million, 10,000, 5 million. Then please do come and talk to us and we can try and point you in the right direction, or alternatively appeal the original decision. One of the other ones, which is an interesting one where people have been running into difficulties, is this in difficulty rule, which basically says where the business assets are over or under the total number of the liabilities outweighed, then the business is classed as being in difficulty. Those state aid rules are EU state aid rules, and they are currently under review. So the government is talking to the British Business Bank and vice versa, and also to the EU. And we understand that clause may well be removed in the future, which again, if you've been rejected, you could relook at that again. So if you're in a net liability position, then the business will be classed as in difficulty. That is being looked at, and that may well change. Clearly, if you're at the lower end of the CBILS and you're thinking, do I apply for a CBILS? Do I apply for the 50,000 that you can get on the business bounce back business loan scheme? There are some real differences between those two, which have caused quite a lot of people to go towards the BBLS. I just want to cover that quickly and what your options may be. So obviously, on the bounce back loan, the default term and interest has been set, whereas obviously on CBILS you get to kind of say how much that you require, the term that you require it over, and the bank then sets the interest rates. So on the BBLS, the maximum or the default limit is 50,000 that you can apply for. That's the max you can apply for, or 25% of turnover. But the interest rate is set at 2.5% over base. And equally, the length of time that you can repay it over is set at 6 years with no repayments for 12 months. So if you do decide to go for that, and it's a much more simple system to get through, and you do find you need more money later, you can come back and reapply for a CBILS loan, providing that CBILS loan then repays the bounce back loan. So you can't have both at the same time, but you can have one or the other. So you can take the BBLS and then repay it with a CBILS loan further down the line. The schemes are open in terms of CBILS till September, and to BBLS till the 4th of November. So again, there are options there for you to have a look at if you do need funds, or you've taken a loan and you find you do need money later further down the line. In terms of what we're looking at moving forward, in terms of coming out of this lockdown, which is now happening, as we can see, just looking at the traffic out the window these days, the amount that's building up. I think Q3 is going to be fairly important as the furlough is phased out, deferred taxes start to kick back in again, payment holidays that you may have had from lenders come to an end. There will be a lot of outgoings required. Really important at this point that you keep a control of your cash flow forecasting, that it's up to date, and that you're reviewing your funding needs by keep talking to your lenders on a regular basis. We've seen, particularly on asset finance, there are some really, really good rates out there at the moment. We're getting more and more lenders that we're talking to starting to open up, particularly on property lending. They're starting to return to business as normal. They're starting to return to being able to go and do on-site surveys, if it's property, if it's asset finance, on-site inspections again. And there are some really good rates. I think we've talked about before what the options will be as we come out of this, because clearly there is going to be a period of ramping up for many businesses. In some cases, it will almost be like starting again, where your business has been mothballed and you've got to get that working capital cycle going. And again, there are some really good options around sort of revolving credit facilities, so external overdrafts from your banking line, which allow you to draw money down, just service the interest on a monthly basis, and then repay the capital as and when you require, and that as and when, from your point of view, the business has really got up and is back into its working capital cycles again. Also, invoice discounting is another really good option. There are lots of different variations of invoice discounting these days, which means you don't have to, in some cases, sign a long-term contract. You don't have to put all of your debtors through. You can pick and choose and give yourself some flexibility where you are making sales and you are raising invoices, but you need cash to keep the business turning over. You can put those into somebody and get some funds quickly against those. I would definitely, as I said, and keep talking to the funders. Many are actually quite happy and want you to talk to them, even if you're in breach of the covenants at the moment. The covenants are still being monitored. Don't think they're not being monitored. They are, but they are we've seen a lot of flexibility around those covenants at this point in time, and providing you keep talking to your lenders, generally that does produce the best outcome, or the best outcomes that we have seen. But there are plenty of options out there. We'd be delighted to help anybody that's got a particular issue, either around CBILS or the larger business scheme, or is alternatively looking at what other options they may need for their business as we come out of this lockdown and we start to ramp back up into full production. I think that's it from me, so I will hand back to Nigel.
That's great. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Stephanie. And so I think the overall themes there are in relation to flexibility. Clearly, your businesses are going to need to be flexible in terms of how you manage coming out of lockdown and how you manage the next normal. I think there'll be a few new normals as we move forward over the next couple of years. But as you move to sort of the next phase for your business, the next phase in terms of coronavirus and moving out of lockdown, there's going to be a need for lots of flexibility, but backed up by some fairly rigorous, although fluid planning. So plan what you need to do things right, get the right funding in place, get the employees bought in and properly used and utilised and supporting the business, use the government support that's out there and sort of leverage that flexibility. But whatever plans you put in place, be prepared for them to change, through October and then Christmas and then into Q1 next year. I think there are going to be a few changes as we move forward, but there is lots of support, lots of flexibility from the government. So just plan it, do it properly. If you have any questions, then clearly you know where we are. Seek professional advice is always the best thing. We will provide continued updates as lots of updates come from the government and from the marketplace almost daily. So we will keep updating, and there'll be a recording of this webinar available probably from tomorrow, and hopefully you'll get something from this webinar, and you can join us at the next one in 2 weeks' time. So thank you everybody for attending, and thank you for the panelists for presenting. Bye now.